Hello friends, and welcome to my improvised setup for Out of Pocket week number 3. My name is Ryan, aka Ron, and today we are talking about heuristics. Help! Heuristics? Help! So what exactly are heuristics, you ask? Well, let's jump right in. Now, in order to define the word heuristic, we're going to employ the help of my new favorite friend, ChatGPT. So, Chat says, a heuristic is a mental shortcut or rule of thumb that helps people make decisions, solve problems, or learn something more quickly than if they were following a strict step-by-step method. Skipping over, in short, heuristics are practical strategies for quick thinking, often based on experience, patterns, or intuition. So what does this have to do with Pokemon Pocket? Well, to help answer that question, I want to take you back to the TCG I used to play again called Flesh and Blood. In Flesh and Blood, there's a podcast called Arsenal Pass, which was run by Hayden Dale and Brendan Patrick. Brendan Patrick used to say the word heuristics a lot, and he got made fun of, but he had a point, so that's kind of where I got this idea from. Basically, the podcast was aimed at competitive players, and when Brendan said the word heuristics, he was thinking of deck building and competitive play. So to return to the chat, he wanted quick mental shortcuts or rules of thumb that helped him make decisions. He wanted practical strategies for quick thinking, often based on experience, patterns, or intuition. What are heuristics concisely? I would say they're methods. You could also call them guidelines or strategies. The point of heuristics is to help you get what you want out of this game. At the end of the day, Pokemon Pocket, Flesh and Blood, card games are just games. We're playing them to have fun. We're playing them maybe to get results, but at the end of the day, the point is to have a good time playing these games. And so we want to get the most out of it that we can. Some examples might be, you just want to have the most fun. Or you might want to be competitive. You might want to be number one in the world. You might want to make money doing this. I don't know what your goals are, but regardless, you have to have heuristics to get there. Otherwise, you'll just be floating and not know what you want to get out of the game. You could apply this broadly to life as well. If you have heuristics, you have plans, you have methods, you have strategies for life, you're probably going to get more out of it than if you just float through life with no strategy or no plan or no heuristics. As the thumbnail says for this video, have a plan. It might be really helpful. By the way, here's some synonyms for heuristics if you didn't see it pop up before. But now, that's enough psychologizing and life advice for the time being. Let's get into the nitty-gritty a little bit of how this applies to Pokemon Pocket specifically. Okay, so I'm going to start with Flesh and Blood again briefly, since that's what I know, and that's how I developed these heuristics in the first place. As I was playing the game, I started developing these rules. I wanted to play with disruption. I wanted to play a certain way. I wanted to deck build a certain way. I really like deck building, so I started to develop these rules, these heuristics in my head, and I wanted to write them down. So what I want to show you now is basically what that structure became. Now, you may not necessarily be this organized or want to go this in depth. You very well may not want to go this in depth. A lot of people probably don't want to, but regardless, this is what I did. I really have a bit of a systematized kind of mind, and so this is how I came up with stuff. So basically, I have this Word document. We have the logo here, Flesh and Blood, and yes, I made a table of contents because this document is huge. Well, I'll just say it's 33 pages long. It's not as complicated as it sounds, but it's really big. So basically, I have heuristics up here. These are the main heuristics. So general heuristics for deck building up here, for sideboarding. Sideboarding was a thing in Flesh and Blood where you can put cards in and out if you're not familiar with the term. Strategy, general. I listed out disruptive cards by class or talent, or in Pokemon Pocket, that would be by type. And then I had all of my heroes. So I had the most relevant attacks for heroes, blah, 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 blah. So basically, as you can see, there was a lot of stuff. This is something I do want to go into real quick. In Flesh and Blood, I developed 3 main focal points up here. Defend, disrupt, and consistency. I believe I mentioned them on an earlier video, but I first started playing the Guardian hero Bravo, and he defended really well, he disrupted really well, and he was super consistent. So in Flesh and Blood, you draw 4 cards per hand, unlike Pocket where you're just drawing 1 hand, so you can kind of craft your percentages a bit around how many cards you're drawing. So within that, I wanted cards that blocked well, because you block and attack with your cards in Flesh and Blood. I wanted cards, as I already mentioned, that disrupt well, because I wanted to attack my opponent efficiently and annoy them, and I wanted consistency. I don't want to rely on high roll strategies. I don't like flipping coins in Pokemon Pocket. I want consistent decks as far as I can do it that give me consistent results. Now, this does mean I'm going to have less high roll potential. It does mean I'm going to get high rolled by some people, especially in Pocket. There's a little more variance, but in general, it does give me fairly consistent results. Now moving through very briefly, as you can see, I typed a ton of this. I don't recommend stopping this video and looking, but basically I typed a ton of stuff, relevant attacks, made it look cool visually. Moving on here, I went deck by deck. So I said, you know, here's my Arachne Huntsman deck. He was an assassin. I said, here's my sideboard for each. So these are the cards coming in, these are the cards coming out, blah, blah, blah. Basically, I made this document to put all my heuristics, all my strategies, all my plans in my head onto paper. But now moving on to Pokemon Pocket. So as you can see, I have the logo again. Again, it's fun. This document's only 22 pages, so I still got 11 to go, but I also have less decks, or well, not less decks, but it's a smaller game. It's a little more simple. So I'm not going to go through all of this in this segment, but the point of this segment is to give you a bit of an intro into the what, why, and how of heuristics, and then I'm going to plan to do a monthly breakdown of different things that are basically in this document every third week of the month moving forward. So brief overview, I wrote all these things down. I just started writing and kind of started categorizing as I go. I don't have a table of contents yet like I do in the Flesh and Blood document, but I might plan to put one in time as it gets bigger, if it gets bigger. So I have general thoughts, so a few random general thoughts where I don't want random. I've already said that. I don't like coin flipping, blah, blah, blah. I don't want cards that have the potential to hurt me. So like Solgaleo is an example here. Solgaleo is super powerful, but it does damage to itself. I don't like that. That's just something I stay away from. Another goal I have is, my goal is to use each Pokemon or evolution line one time per deck. So obviously when, say, Sylveon was coming out, everyone wanted to put Sylveon in everything, and then, you know, baby Pokemon or whatever, people just want to throw everything, like one Pokemon in every deck. I would like to explore the game through as many decks as possible, as many lines as possible. So I've made it a rule for myself, a heuristic, that I only want to have one Pokemon line total in all of my decks. Obviously that's competitively shooting myself in the foot a little, but again, my heuristic, my goals are not to be the best in the world. I want to have fun disrupting people, annoying people, being consistent, and playing different types of Pokemon in my decks. So that's the rule I've made for myself. Briefly going quickly now, we've got energy costs. So I'm looking to go, you know, cheaper attacks in general. So I'm not trying to go 3 cost attacks or 4 cost attacks. I'm trying to keep it 2 or less if at all possible, which is generally what people do anyway, minus Giratina or Darkrai or things like that. But this was just me putting down some thoughts on energy costs. Going quickly again, I want to spend a lot of time here moving forward, but I've tried to break down cards mathematically and how I think the developers are designing them, because that gives you a bit of a basis of how valuable, how good cards are. Obviously there's a lot more to cards than just the math of them. There's synergy, which I also plan to talk about in future weeks, but knowing the general math of a card is definitely helpful. At the end of the day, these cards are just math. They are math, they have numbers, and then they make them look cool. They put a Pokemon art on the card, they put the HP, the attack, they have different abilities, they make the math fun, but at the end of the day, you can kind of break it down to math and just simplify and do it that way. So that kind of helps me think through the value of cards. But moving on, here I've tried to break down all the math of different cards. I'll plan to get into this later. You can pause if you really want to. This is still a work in progress. I have disruption rules, so general thoughts on what I want to do with disruption. It helps keep me focused again. Relevant disruptors by type. These are disruptors that I am using in decks currently and really enjoy using. I'm not using every disruptive Pokemon in the game. These are the ones I'm using. We have relevant cards for my deck building. Deck heuristics, so I'll plan to get into this as well, but basically my decks are pretty similar. I don't have one deck that has, you know, 12 Pokemon, another that has 4 Pokemon. Obviously there's ranges, but I have said for all of my decks I'm putting 8 Pokemon, and then I have different cards that I'm using for supporter cards, for trainer cards, to help support these 8 Pokemon. That's just how I want to build decks. That's how I like to build decks. It's what makes sense to me. Again, these are my heuristics. You don't have to have them yourself, but I recommend coming up with heuristics for yourself. So moving forward, we have, this is just breaking down. I will plan to get into this in future weeks. This is me ranking my decks. If I had to play a tournament, what do I think my best decks are? I'm ranking them in different things like power, health, etc. And then this is me just breaking down all the decks I'm using. If you really want to stop and pause this, you can, but I will plan to get into all this in later weeks. All right, so that was a very brief overview on the section Heuristics Help. Obviously, the segment's not going to be for everybody, but maybe if you have more of a mathematical mind or you're interested in the strategy and more competitive aspect of the game, this is probably the segment for you out of the ones that I do. I will again reiterate that I'm not playing meta decks, I'm not employing meta decks, I'm not doing strategy on meta decks, I'm not trying to be the best in the world, but I do want to be good. I'm trying to get to Master Ball. I'm currently in Ultra Ball 1, trying to get up a few at a time until I kick you back and then you go forward, and then I'm trying to get to Master Ball. That's the goal. So ideally this segment will be not only interesting but competitively helpful and help you to put some words or thoughts or things on paper about what you want to get out of this game or even any other game or in life in general. Obviously you don't have to put stuff on paper, that's just what I've done. You might not develop a big document like I did, it's just a thought, but worth thinking about. Now, with all that said, let me close with two main things. First, I want to tell you some about what I want to do on this segment moving forward. So like my heuristics document, I've written down some notes for what I want to do on this segment. So next time I want to talk about card math. So I want to talk about what basic card math is. So what it looks like for basic Pokemon, what it looks like for basic EX Pokemon, what it looks like for stage 1 Pokemon, stage 2 Pokemon, EX, and all of those things, etc. I want to kind of break down each card into what the numerical value of those cards is as far as I can tell. Some other things I want to do in this segment are talk about deck building. So obviously that was in my heuristics guide. I want to talk about my specific decks and maybe you can get something out of it that you find enjoyable. I also want to talk about synergies, how specific Pokemon work together well and how they work with supporter cards and stuff like that. I also want to talk about style. So thinking about how you want to play the game. I like to play more control, more disruptive, but maybe you want to play aggressive. Maybe you just want to play meta decks. Maybe you want to play more of a fatigue type of run your opponent out of threats type of deck. And maybe you prefer a bunch of different styles, but that's good to know too. I also want to talk about what makes a meta deck, why it's meta in the first place, why people are gravitating towards it, what makes it so good, etc. And then I'd like to do a lot on gameplay strategy. So once you have a deck, once you know what Pokemon you want to play, what are heuristics in game? So I actually haven't written these things down, but I have some of them in my head and it's good to know. So if I go first, what Pokemon do I want to put out? If I go second, where do I put my energy? Do I evolve this Pokemon or do I wait? Do I have a comm in my hand? Do I go looking for a different Pokemon or do I put this one on the bench? If my opponent does this, what do I do in that situation? Obviously, it's really hard to nail down particulars on every situation, which is part of the fun of card games, but it's good to have heuristics in gameplay as well as deck building and other things. Okay, that's enough talk about heuristics for 1 week. Ideally, that whets your appetite a little bit for what this segment could be, but enough for week number 1. Next week, the plan is to do the first segment for tasty tiers and do a fun tier list. I won't reveal what it is just yet, but maybe stick around for that one. It could be fun. Again, thank you for watching. If you did, I really appreciate it as I try to grow the channel, and I'm going to sign off with a classic Dude Perfect sign off. Please don't sue me. Pound it. Noggin. See ya.